I've started most mornings of my adult life the same way, leaning against the old cedar post on my front porch, holding my father's chipped blue mug, watching the light crawl across the gravel drive. There's nothing special about the ritual, nothing cinematic, but it's mine. It's steady. It's an anchor to a property that's carried my family's sweat and stubbornness for almost 60 years. That morning was no different at first. The fog clung low across the field, soft enough to blur the edges of the barn. A pair of crows argued in the oak branches above the gate, the same gate my father welded the summer before I was born. He built it from reclaimed ranch, steel-heavy, imperfect, and honest. He used to say, if something's worth keeping, build it so folks have to think twice before touching it. Turns out he was right. Maybe more right than even he expected. I heard the sound before I saw anything. Tires rolling over gravel, slow, deliberate. Not the pace of someone lost or curious. More like someone arriving with purpose. I lowered the mug and stepped off the porch, not in fear, just instinct. When strangers show up uninvited at a property like mine, they usually do it for one of three reasons: to sell something, to claim something, or to cause trouble. And trouble usually dresses better than the other two. Three figures appeared at the bend in the road. One in a navy blazer, posture straight as a winter fence post, heels sharp against the stones. The other two wore matching polo shirts with a logo I couldn't read from a distance. They moved like they belonged somewhere else, like this wasn't their kind of land. But they were determined to treat it like it was. I stayed behind the gate, letting its iron bars stand between us. My father always said boundaries weren't just lines on paper. They were. Agreements with yourself about what you protect. Morning, I said, keeping my tone even. The woman in the blazer didn't waste time with courtesy. She pressed her hand to the gate and rattled it once, testing it like she expected the lock to give way. When it didn't, she pinned me with a polished smile that held no warmth. You'll need to unlock this, she said. No, I won't, I answered. She blinked, surprised that someone standing in boots and an old flannel wasn't folding under her authority. I'm Marcia Alden, president of the Lakeshore Bluff Homeowners Association, she said. We're here to conduct a property compliance inspection. Inspection for what? I asked. Boundary violations, unauthorized gate construction, and unpaid association dues. If I hadn't been so irritated, I might have laughed. I'm not in your HOA, I said plainly. All three of them looked at each other. As if I'd just claimed the sky wasn't blue. That's incorrect, Marcia said. Every house on this stretch belongs to Lakeshore Bluff. I'll let the silence stretch. For a moment before answering, this land has been in my family since 1964. Your development went up in 2008. You all built your houses around us. Not the other way around. Her smile faltered for the first time. We have paperwork, she insisted. So do I said. She lifted a clipboard and slid a notice through the gap in the bars. Trim branches. Replace gate. Pay fees. Threats of daily fines. Legal consequences. The usual HOA seasoning. I folded the paper slowly. The way my father folded letters he never intended to acknowledge. It's not happening, I said. Her lips thinned, and something sharper flashed in her eyes. Not surprise. Not confusion control. The kind of control that doesn't like being told it hit a wall. You'll regret this, she said. Turning toward her car, I doubted, I replied. But my calm didn't last long because later that afternoon, walking my eastern boundary, I found fresh boot prints pressed deep into the soil prints too recent to belong to hikers or hunters. And when I checked my security footage, 15 minutes were gone. Clean cut. Deleted. Not glitched. Which meant someone had been on my property before the inspection. Someone who knew how to hide it. I didn't feel fear. I felt insulted. There's a special kind of anger that comes when someone walks. The land your father bled to keep standing. And in that moment, every quiet morning spent drinking coffee under the old oak felt threatened. I went inside, pulled down the steel lockbox my father kept under his bed, and opened it on the kitchen table. Deeds, surveyor maps, boundary markers, original purchase agreements, notarized everything. My father may not have had much formal education, but he understood paperwork like a lawyer. He had one rule: when someone tries to take what's yours, your words won't protect you. Your papers will. I ran my hand across the oldest map, the pencil lines still crisp, the land boundaries unmistakable. My house was a full 300 feet outside the HOA's jurisdiction. They could knock. They could threaten. They could rattle the gate until their arms got tired, but they couldn't claim an inch of this soil, or so I thought. The next morning, I found a new notice taped to the gate post, a formal-looking envelope with a county seal that didn't sit right with me. The wording was stiff, too stiff, like someone trying to imitate official language rather than writing it naturally. It claimed my gate violated county safety codes and required removal within 7 days. I called the county office. A woman answered, cheerful but curious about my question. "That letter isn't from us," she said. "Are you sure?" I asked. "I'm looking at the reference numbers now," she replied. "They don't match our system, and we don't use that email domain. Could an HOA send something like this?" I asked. "They can send whatever they want," she said, "but they can't pretend they're the county. That's a crime." I stared at the envelope for a long minute after the call ended. So the HOA wasn't just wrong, they were dirty. But things weren't finished escalating. 3 days later, just after midnight, I woke to a sound that did not belong in the quiet of my land, the hiss of spray paint. I shot up, grabbed my boots and flashlight, and pulled up the backup camera feed. The image flickered before sharpening. A hooded figure stood at my gate, their movements fast and nervous. Red paint dripping across the iron bars. Letters forming sloppy and uneven. Under the shaky beam of their phone light, pay. Yoop or move. That told me everything. I needed to know this wasn't about rules. This was about control. I didn't confront them that night. I let the camera capture every second. When they left, stumbling back to a waiting SUV, I stayed awake until sunrise. When morning came, I didn't wipe the message off. I wanted it as evidence. I wanted the ugliness of it to sit there in the open where sunlight could make it real. My father always said, "Don't cover the truth. Use it." By noon, I had 3 new steps in motion. Installed a completely offline camera system hidden inside the oak, tree-printed every screenshot, and placed them in an evidence binder. Called an attorney who specialized in property rights. When she saw the footage, she didn't look shocked. She looked furious. "They overstepped," she said. "And you're not the first." "What do I do?" I asked. "You document everything," she said. "You stay calm. And you let me handle the rest." That night, I stood at the gate again, the red spray-painted threat still glaring back at me. The wind rustled the oak leaves. A cold breeze brushed the back of my neck. I wasn't scared. I wasn't uncertain. I was ready for whatever they were planning next. Ready to defend my father's land. Ready to prove what paperwork, patience, and the truth can do when someone crosses the wrong boundary. And they had crossed it farther than they realized, farther than they could walk back. And the real fight hadn't even started yet. The morning after the red spray paint message, I stood by the gate longer than usual. My father's mug cooled in my hand while the words dried into the iron. Pay up or move. It wasn't just vandalism. It was a declaration, a promise, an attempt to break something inside me before the real fight began. The sun crept over the ridge, spilling pale gold across the gravel, lighting up every stroke of that sloppy red paint. And as I stared at it, I realized something. Anger isn't loud at first. It's heavy, like a stone dropped into a deep well. You don't hear it hit bottom until much later. I walked back toward the porch, but halfway there I stopped. Out of instinct, I glanced toward the oak tree on the eastern line. The leaves swayed lightly in the breeze, but the wind wasn't what drew my attention. It was the quiet. Too quiet. Even the crows weren't talking. That never meant anything good. I took another slow look around the yard, but saw nothing out of place. Still, something felt wrong. Something in the air. Like the land itself was aware of an intruder before I was. I went inside and set my mug on the counter. Then I pulled the binder from the table where I'd left it the night before, packed with photos, printed screenshots, and notes. I added one more page. Threat message on gate 1:38 a.m., red paint. Each item had a timestamp. Each timestamp was building a wall stronger than anything the HOA thought they could tear down. But evidence alone wasn't enough. I needed preparation. Not paranoia, preparation. So I started with the cameras. The new offline system I'd installed in the oak tree was performing perfectly silent, invisible, impossible to hack remotely. But I wanted more angles. More coverage. Something that saw before the intruders even stepped foot on the property by noon. I'd mounted a second camera inside the old birdhouse beside the barn. No bird had nested there in years. And the opening was the perfect size for a lens. Then came the third, hidden inside a rusted lantern hanging by the porch. The lantern wasn't even functional anymore, but now it could see everything. When I finished, the coverage felt complete. Front, sides, approach angles. Night and day. Anyone trying anything again wasn't just going to be caught. They were going to be recorded in the kind of clarity lawyers dream about. But cameras weren't my only defense. I drove into town, bought 2 motion-activated floodlights, and installed them by dusk one, facing the gate, one near the barn. The kind that snap on, like a spotlight, when someone moves wrong by sunset. Property felt awake. Alert, ready. I wasn't a man preparing for a fight. I was a man preparing to finish one at around 6 p.m. As the last thread of sun slipped behind the tree line, someone knocked at my porch door. A soft knock, not urgent, not angry, just hesitant. Behind the screen stood a woman I recognized from the HOA's Edge Homes. Quiet resident. Always walking a small terrier at dusk. She looked nervous, glancing over her shoulder as if someone had followed her. "Can I help you?" I asked. She swallowed hard. I shouldn't be here. Then why are you? She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Because you're in danger," she said. I straightened. Not because I felt threatened, but because the truth had just shifted under my feet. "What do you mean?" I asked. She wrung her hands. "I saw something last night. People I recognized. People from the board." That didn't surprise me. The HOA board thought they were untouchable. Authority does that to people. "What exactly did you see?" I asked. "They were parked near your fence," she whispered. "Around midnight. 2 of them. One of them, I'm sure, was President Alden." She didn't have to say more. My cameras had already confirmed it. "Why tell me?" I asked gently. She looked down at her shoes. "Because they've done things before. 2 other homeowners harassed them. Issued fake notices. Fined people into selling." Her voice cracked. "I don't want that happening to you. And they're planning something else. Something bigger." "What kind of bigger?" She hesitated. "Then they talked about removing your gate. Forcing it. Bringing someone who could handle it quietly." Their words, not mine. I felt a cold ripple move up my spine. Not fear, but clarity. The HOA wasn't just bullying. They were escalating fast. "Did you hear when?" I asked. "Tonight," she whispered. "Late." I nodded once. Calm, controlled. "Thank you for telling me." She hesitated, like she expected me to send her away. Instead, I stepped closer to the screen door. "You can trust me," I said. "But don't put yourself in danger for my sake." She nodded, tears shining in her eyes. then hurried back down the path as if she didn't want to be seen leaving my property. I closed the door slowly, quietly. Tonight was going to be different. Tonight, I was waiting. By midnight, I'd positioned myself inside the house with the lights off. Not hiding, documenting. The lantern cam blinked silently on my screen. The birdhouse cam showed the barn side. The oak tree cam watched the entire gate approach. At 1:17 a.m., headlights appeared down the road, slow, careful, trying not to draw attention. The SUV stopped just outside the gate, engine humming low. 2 figures stepped out. One carried bolt cutters again. The other held a phone raised like before. Their movements were confident, practiced, like they'd done this before. I zoomed the camera feed. The woman filming President, Marcia Alden. Her stance was unmistakable. The man with her wasn't from the HOA. Too tall, too deliberate. Muscles built for labor, not paperwork. A hired hand. He tested the lock, then brought the bolt cutters into position. My father's lock didn't stand a chance. Not because it was weak, but because some tools are made for destruction. The metal snapped loudly enough to echo through the yard. I didn't move yet. The camera caught everything. They pushed the gate open, stepping onto my land like they'd just exercised a right, not committed a crime. Marcia began filming the entire yard again, my porch, the barn, the oak, the flower beds. She whispered to the man, "Get the hinges. We'll remove the whole thing." He took out a wrench, kneeling at the gate. The metal groaned under his attempts. Then I flipped the switch. Both floodlights snapped on, blinding, sudden, merciless. The beam washed across the yard like a stadium spotlight, illuminating their faces, their expressions, their guilt. The man jumped back. Marcia froze mid-step. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. I stepped onto the porch with my phone raised. I already called the sheriff. I said, my voice steady, deliberate. "You have about 2 minutes." The man bolted for the SUV. Marcia stumbled, tripping in the gravel. Something flew off her neck, skittering across the stone's metal. Shnani, a necklace. Not just any necklace. A distinctive pearl strand with a gold clasp. Something expensive. Something identifiable. "Go." She hissed at the man. He shoved her into the passenger seat. And the SUV tore down the road so fast, gravel sprayed behind them like shrapnel. I waited until their taillights vanished. Then, I walked down to the gate. The necklace lay half buried near the hinge. I picked it up gently with gloved hands, held it under the floodlight. A gold clasp. Engraved initials, M.A. Marcia Alden. The HOA president had just dropped her. Signature at the scene of a break-in. I slipped the necklace into an evidence bag and checked the time. Sheriff would be here any minute. When the cruiser's blue lights appeared at the road, I waved the deputy in. He parked near the gate and stepped out, eyes scanning the broken lock, the open hinges, the scattered gravel. "What happened here?" he asked, voice firm but curious. I handed him the evidence bag. "This," I said, "and a whole lot more." We reviewed the footage on my porch, the deputy leaning forward as Marcia's face filled the screen. He exhaled sharply. "That's pretty damn clear?" "Clear enough to press charges?" I asked. He nodded. "Clear enough to start a file? And clear enough that our investigators will be contacting her first thing in the morning?" "What about tonight?" I asked. "We'll patrol the area. If they come back, we'll handle it from there." I thanked him. And after taking statements, pictures, and the necklace for processing, he drove away. When the lights faded, I stood at the gate again, hands in pockets. The night air cool against my face. The land felt restless, like it had held its breath for too long, but now things were shifting, not in their favor, in mine. And the HOA had just made the biggest mistake they could make. They turned a dispute into a crime, and crimes leave footprints. The next morning, I drove to my attorney's office, binder in hand. She met me in her conference room, flipped through the photos, paused at the necklace picture, then looked up at me with something colder than anger. They broke the law, she said, blatantly, and they recorded themselves doing it. She paced slowly behind her desk. This isn't an HOA dispute anymore. This is criminal trespass. Destruction of property, harassment, possibly conspiracy, and if that forged county letter ties back to them, we're adding fraud. What do we do now? I asked. She sat down, steepled her fingers, and smiled like a chess player who'd just cornered the opposing king. We prepare, she said. We build a case so strong the judge won't need a second look. And the HOA? They'll panic, she said. People who abuse authority always do when someone stands up to them. And Marcia? She doubled down, my attorney said. People like her don't back away. They only back themselves into corners. She was right. Marcia wasn't done. Not even close. But neither was I. That evening I repainted the section of the gate where the red message had been. Slow, careful strokes. The same shade of black my father used. When I was a boy, painting felt like reclaiming. Something like wiping away an intrusion and putting history back where it belonged. The wind rustled softly through the oak leaves. A dog barked far down the road. Night settled in patches of blue and silver. I stood there until the paint dried, then locked the gate with a temporary clamp, knowing the real replacement lock would arrive tomorrow. When I finally walked back up the porch steps, I paused for a moment and looked out over the land, my land. This place had seen storms before. Weather, time, human stubbornness, and it had survived them. All this was no different. They thought they could intimidate me, but they forgot something. A man who lives on inherited land doesn't break easy. I closed the porch door behind me. Chapter 2 ended there. But the war was just beginning. The morning after the sheriff filed the initial report, the whole property felt different. Not quiet or heavier, like the land itself knew something big had shifted. The oak branches hung low in the damp air, and the gravel driveway still held the faint imprint of the SUV's tires. Even the birds didn't seem ready to talk yet. I stood at the porch railing with my father's mug, watching steam rise into the cool air, thinking about how fast peace can unravel when someone decides that your boundaries inconvenience their plans. What they didn't realize was something my father taught me a long time ago. Land remembers who stands for it. And by the time the sun rose fully that day, the land wasn't the only thing remembering. Around 9 a.m., I received an email from my attorney marked urgent. Attached to it was something that made my stomach drop, not from fear, but from the sheer stupidity of it. The HOA board had sent a mass email to all residents in their subdivision. With my name in it, it read, "We regret to inform the community that a non-compliant resident outside the HOA boundaries is threatening the harmony and safety of our neighborhood. This individual refuses to follow required standards and has escalated matters through legal intimidation. The HOA will now pursue all available avenues to enforce compliance." My attorney called immediately. "They just made a public accusation," she said, "against someone they admit in writing is outside the HOA boundary." "This is good." "Very good. They practically confessed," I muttered. She chuckled. "They confessed, defamed, and contradicted themselves in 3 sentences. I couldn't have scripted it better." I forwarded her everything: screenshots, timestamps, headers. This wasn't just a mistake. It was arrogance trying to look like authority, and it was going to cost them. Before noon, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. "Is this the property owner dealing with the Lakeshore Bluff HOA?" The caller asked. "Depends who's asking." "This is Megan Clark with the county newspaper," she said. "We received a tip about potential HOA overreach and criminal activity. I'd like to ask, I cut her off gently. Everything that needs to be said will be said in court. There was a pause. Most people try to push past that line, but she didn't. Then all I need is one confirmation. Is it true the HOA attempted to forcibly remove your gate? Yes, I said. And I have video. That's enough. Thank you. By evening, the online edition of the local paper published a headline: HOA President under investigation for forgery, trespass, and vandalism. The comments section exploded. Some residents were shocked. Some pretended they always knew. Some begged for the HOA to be dissolved. But one comment stood out. Finally, someone stood up to them. We've been bullied for years. That was when I realized something important. They weren't just fighting me. They were fighting the truth coming out, and truth always spreads further than fear. A week later, the HOA called a mandatory emergency meeting. My attorney encouraged me to attend. Let them speak, she said. Let them dig their own hole deeper. So I went. The meeting room inside the Lakeshore Bluff clubhouse looked like they'd turned a community pool room into a courtroom. Folding chairs in rows. A long table at the front. The board members sitting stiff and nervous. Marcia Alden sat in the middle, hair perfect, jaw tight. But the confidence she wore like armor was cracked around the edges. Residents whispered as I entered, "That's him, the one they tried to fine. Isn't he outside the HOA?" I heard they broke his gate. I didn't sit. I stood at the back. The vice president called the meeting to order. We are addressing recent misunderstandings, she began. Misunderstandings? I almost laughed. Marcia took the microphone. In light of recent events, she said, we believe the resident in question has fabricated evidence, and my attorney stepped forward. She had warned them she'd be present. They ignored her. I'd advise you, she said calmly, to stop before you commit more defamation. Gasps, murmurs. A woman covered her mouth. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Marcia's face twitched, her first crack in public. We have the right to enforce community standards, she snapped. You do, my attorney said, within your boundaries, which his land isn't part of. And we have the video of you cutting his lock at 1:17 a.m. Would you like me to play it for the room? The room erupted. What? They broke in. I knew something was off. They vandalized his gate. Is this true, Marcia? Marcia reached for the microphone. This is being taken out of con. My attorney pulled out a folder and held up the forged county letter. This was sent to him, she said. It is fake. It is a felony. Real silence. The kind that settles heavy on the skin. People started turning in their chairs to look at Marcia the way you look at someone you finally recognize, not as a leader, but as a threat. A man in the third row stood. I have a teenage daughter who was fined $300 for having her bike in the driveway for 4 minutes. Was that you two? A woman raised her hand. You fined my mother for planting marigolds? Someone else? Did you threaten that old couple on Ridgeway Lane? And then you lied to us. It was no longer my fight. The whole room had turned. I walked out quietly. My attorney beside me. You did the right thing, she said as we reached the parking lot. I didn't even say a word. That's the beauty of truth, she said. It talks for you. 2 weeks later, the court hearing began. The judge was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, the kind who could silence a room with a breath. My attorney opened with the boundary maps, the deed, the county certification. The judge accepted them with one nod. Then she turned to the HOA side. What authority did your board believe it held over this property? Their lawyer tried to maneuver, but the judge raised a hand. I'm asking directly. Marcia cleared her throat. Misunderstood the boundaries. Then explained the forged county letter. Marcia froze and explained. The judge continued. Why you were on his property at 1:17 a.m. with bolt cutters. The video played. No one spoke. Not even the HOA lawyer. When the necklace was presented, a small sound escaped from Marcia, the kind of sound someone makes when they finally understand the consequences they've been outrunning. The judge leaned back, folded her arms, and stared straight at her. "You abused your authority," she said. "You lied. You trespassed. You committed fraud. And you attempted to intimidate a homeowner outside your jurisdiction. This court will not tolerate such behavior." Her gavel struck like thunder. Judgment granted. Damages ordered. Charges filed. But the most devastating blow was this. Marcia Alden, you are hereby removed from the HOA. Presidency effective immediately and barred from holding any leadership, role in any homeowners association for 10 years. The courtroom erupted, but I didn't feel triumph. I felt BALANCEA, weight shifting back where it belonged. The fallout spread fast. 17 families filed motions to exit the HOA entirely. Several demanded refunds for improper fines. A financial audit was launched. Board members resigned in clusters. The county opened a criminal investigation. In the interim, HOA president, someone the neighborhood actually respected, sent me a letter. "Thank you for exposing what many of us were too afraid to challenge. Your patience and resolve changed our community." I appreciated it, but I didn't need gratitude. I just wanted peace. A month after the ruling, I repainted the gate again. Same black, same careful strokes, same scent of oil and iron mixing in the warm air. The new lock clicked with the same confidence the old one had. My father would have been proud of that sound. A little boy from one of the edge houses paused while riding his bike. "Passed." "Hey," he said shyly. "Is that the gate they tried to steal?" I smiled. "Yeah, but we kept it." He nodded, as if that answer meant something bigger to him than to me. Kids understand honesty better than adults sometimes. He pedaled off, looking back twice at the gate like it was a character from a story. And maybe it was. I finished repainting, closed the gate gently, and locked it with a soft metallic click. Then I stood there with my father's mug. The same way I had before any of this started. The oak leaves rustled. The air felt clean again. Quiet returned, not the uneasy quiet of fear, but the peaceful quiet of a place protected. And as I walked back toward the porch, something settled inside me. Not victory, not revenge, just truth. Truth that held steady. Truth that stood firm. Truth that didn't bow. The land remained mine, because I did too.